Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing good today because I've got a really long and detailed breakdown to talk through with you, and it's all about the brand new ARK Survival Ascended Update 72.1. Now, if you've been following the game closely, you know every patch that Wildcard drops brings its own mix of bug fixes, quality of life changes, and sometimes those sneaky little balance tweaks that totally shift how the game feels. This one is no exception. Even though at first glance it might look small on paper, the effects it has on your experience as a player can actually be way bigger than what a quick skim of the patch notes would suggest. And since this update has a few layers to it, I want to really unpack each one, talk about why it matters, and share my own thoughts on how it might affect your day-to-day time on the servers, whether you're on official, unofficial, or just hanging out in single player. First up, let's talk about probably the most important fix that came through with this patch. There was this nasty issue where players would load into a server after transferring and then the game would just hang up. I know some of you probably experienced it where you'd get stuck during the loading process and the only way to fix it was to close out completely and relog. Now, anyone who's been around ARK long enough knows that server transfers are a huge part of the gameplay loop, especially when you're moving between maps to get specific resources, hunt down rare dinos, or just trade and interact with other communities. So when that system breaks down, it's more than just an inconvenience. It can actually disrupt entire gameplay sessions and make you hesitate to transfer at all. So with this update, that's been addressed. And while it's easy to gloss over a line in the patch notes that just says, fix the stall hang when transferring, I can tell you from experience that this one change alone makes the game feel way smoother. You're not sitting there nervously hoping the game doesn't lock up. You can just move between servers with a lot more confidence. That's the kind of thing that doesn't sound flashy, but the impact is massive if you're playing regularly. Now, the second piece worth talking about is that they tackled another exploit. Wildcard doesn't always detail what the exploit was, and that's pretty standard because obviously they don't want to give people a blueprint for recreating it, but this is always one of those things that tells you they're paying attention to the balance of the game. Anyone who's been around ARK for a while knows how game-breaking exploits can be. We've had periods in the past where duping items or abusing building mechanics completely destabilize servers, and that sort of thing drives players away faster than anything else. When you're spending hours grinding resources or taming that one perfect dino, it's discouraging if someone else just shortcuts the whole system using some glitch. So every time I see them fix an exploit, I take it as a positive sign that they're actively keeping an eye on fairness. It's not glamorous, but it's crucial, and I think it's worth appreciating because without these constant exploit fixes, the game would have collapsed under its own weight a long time ago. Let's move over to the PC side for a minute, because this update did something really interesting that I think is going to catch some people off guard. They pushed through a one-time reset of everyone's graphics settings to optimize defaults, especially targeting people who are running systems with under 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, if you're not super tech savvy, that might just sound like a little behind-the-scenes housekeeping, but actually, it's a pretty big deal. ARK is notorious for being one of the most demanding games on your hardware, and it's been that way since the original Survival Evolved days. You can have a beefy PC and still find your frames tanking if your settings aren't dialed in just right. For people with less powerful cards, the struggle has always been finding that sweet spot between visuals and performance. What Wildcard has done here is basically say, look, we're going to reset everything to a baseline that we know will run more smoothly on your system. And then if you want to tweak things after that, you still can. That's smart. I've already seen players mentioning that after the reset, their game feels noticeably smoother, especially in those intense base areas where you've got a ton of structures loading in. And honestly, yeah, it can be a little annoying when your settings reset and suddenly your shadows, textures, or resolution look different. But if it helps eliminate stutter and improve stability, I'd say it's worth the few minutes of readjusting. It's not just about pretty graphics. It's about keeping the game playable, especially for mid-range hardware that was struggling. And let me add something here. This kind of reset is also a sign that Wildcard is thinking about accessibility in a subtle way. They know not everyone is sitting on a top-tier GPU, so optimizing the experience for more players is how you keep your community from fragmenting. Because ARK isn't just a solo experience, it's about servers full of people, and if performance barriers keep half the community out, then the whole ecosystem suffers. So yes, this one-time reset is more important than it might sound. It's not just flipping a switch. It's essentially Wildcard trying to make sure that more players can actually stick around and enjoy the game without fighting against technical hurdles all the time. Now let's circle back to how this all ties together. You've got smoother server transfers, exploit patches that keep the gameplay fair, and a technical reset that boosts stability. None of these things individually sound like massive content drops or expansions, but together they point toward one clear message. Wildcard is laying the groundwork for the bigger stuff. Every time they do these kinds of behind-the-scenes fixes, it's almost like they're clearing the table so the main course can come out. You don't want to push new dinos, new maps, or big seasonal events if the core systems are unstable, because then everything just breaks down. So even though 72.1 feels like one of those maintenance patches, I actually see it as a really important step toward whatever's next. Let me give you a real-world example of why this matters. Imagine you're playing on a PvP cluster, and your tribe is mid-war with another tribe. You're transferring characters and resources between servers constantly, and if that old stall bug hit you mid-transfer, you'd lose critical time or even items. That could literally change the outcome of a battle. Same thing with exploits. If your rival tribe is abusing a glitch that you can't defend against, what's the point of fighting? The game stops being about skill or strategy and turns into a who knows the most bugs competition. And then with graphics performance, even if you're amazing at PvP or a builder with incredible base designs, if your frames are constantly dipping, your actual gameplay suffers. That's why this patch, even though it doesn't come with flashy new content, is so valuable. It shores up the foundation of ARK, which is something the community really does need. And I think that's where the conversation gets interesting, because players always want new content, right? Right? We want new creatures to tame, new maps to explore, new structures to build. That hunger is what drives excitement. But if the core of the game isn't stable, that content just becomes frustrating instead of fun. I've been around long enough to remember when they released brand new creatures in Survival Evolved, but server desync and exploits made them almost impossible to enjoy. You'd get hyped up for the new content, and then you'd spend half your time troubleshooting bugs or getting wiped unfairly. So honestly, these maintenance patches are just as exciting to me, even if they don't sound like it at first. They're what makes sure the game you love actually runs in a way where the content can shine when it does drop. And speaking of that, this patch also raises a lot of speculation about what's coming down the line. We're already halfway through September, and if you look at the history of ARK updates, this is usually when things start ramping up toward fall events or even bigger content drops in October. A patch like this, stabilizing transfers, addressing exploits, resetting graphics, almost feels like they're making sure the house is in order before inviting everyone over for the party. And if that's the case, we might be closer to hearing about either a new seasonal event or something bigger for Ascended than people realize. Of course, that's just me reading between the lines, but longtime ARK players know that these patterns often repeat. Something else I want to point out, and this is more about the experience of actually playing after the patch rather than the notes themselves. Whenever you get a graphics reset, it forces you to notice things about the game world you might have stopped paying attention to. Maybe your shadows look different, or the draw distance changes, and suddenly you're seeing the environment in a new way. For me, after this patch reset, my settings, I actually noticed how much smoother the lighting looked in dense forests, and it reminded me just how beautiful this game can be when it's running well.